I'm Greg Giuliano. I'm an executive coach, organizational change consultant, and author. I believe leaders have the power to shape the future and change people's lives. I also believe people who challenge the status quo and go beyond usual and ordinary are rare. They're willing to go to the edge and push farther, over and over again. When I find these ultra leaders, I love to talk with them. In each episode, I talk with ultra leaders to learn how they do what they do and how they keep growing as leaders. I promise you a full dose of ultra leadership from other ultra leaders just like you in every conversation. We're at the edge of another episode. Let's jump in. Welcome to another episode of Ultra Leadership. I am excited today. Our guest is Dan McAllister. Dan is SVP for Global Alliances and Channels at Boomi, the platform for intelligent connectivity and automation. Dan has an impressive track record of leadership at Salesforce, MuleSoft, Box, NetSuite, and SAP, building and maintaining partner ecosystems that drive results across all metrics. His formula for success is to focus on delivering value across the customer lifecycle, developing sustainable revenue plans for both the organization and the partner community, creating awareness through market-to-market and market-with campaigns, and developing practices via flexible enablement programs and driving innovation with partner IP through solution and asset creation. He also knows how to keep teams together and people activated through significant change. He did his undergraduate degree at Clarkson University and has an MBA from Hofstra. Home base is Atlanta, Georgia. I'm excited to welcome Dan McAllister. Hi, Dan.
Hey, Greg. Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to talk today.
I am really looking forward to this because you've got these 20 years or so of experience and expertise, and you've been on both sides of acquisitions in your career. And that's a lot of change. And so right out of the gate, I'm curious, as somebody who's weathered it, what's the biggest lesson that you've learned as having to navigate through these changes and lead others through these changes?
Sure. That's a very big question, but to maybe provide some context for those that haven't looked at my LinkedIn profile, I have been through quite a number of acquisitions. Earlier on in my career, I actually worked at Computer Associates and supported the leader who did many acquisitions, so I saw it from that angle. Then later in my career, as I was at a company called Seagate Info, which was spun off to Crystal Decisions, which was acquired by Business Objects, which was then acquired by SAP. And then also, later in my career, moving into MuleSoft after a year and a half of IPO, we were acquired by Salesforce. And so a lot of change in there and fascinating each and every one of those experiences. And I think if there was one big lesson, I think this is a big topic, we should probably dig into multiple areas. But if you focus on providing value and delivering on what's in the best interest of the company that you're representing, then you can't go wrong. I've never been in a situation where I was feeling like, hey, maybe I'm the odd guy out, or I'm the situation where a team is going to be consolidated or moved around. So long as I was providing value, I felt like that was a great way to think about how I represent myself, how I represent the team, how I recommend everybody act in the process, and just provide value to the organization. And generally, that's what they're acquiring you for, and that's what you need to represent the organization. So that's always a true north for me.
So when you talk about providing value, so I split that into, I take that a step to the next step, that it's really understanding the customer and creating value with the customer or the partner, and then creating a valuable experience for the employee as a part of that whole process.
I think that's 100% dead on. And when I think about providing value, every organization should be centered around the customer. Right. And so if you think about what is your role, how can you provide value to the customer lifecycle, be that helping create demand, helping, sell to win, your products or services to those organizations, helping make sure, I work at ISVs generally, how we deliver successfully and make sure the customer gets their outcomes that they're initially intending. And then also, how do you stay with it and continue to drive ongoing customer success and adoption of your solution. So as we're all now primarily in subscription-based software, that's incredibly important, right? The cost of maintaining a customer and expanding is, multitudes less than going out and winning new logos. And so that's got to be a primary Portia strategy. So when I think about value, no matter what part of the organization you're in, you should think about those probably four components. And if you're not directly engaged, you should think about how do I support teams that provide those things, and help them win, help them be more successful. And that's value to the equation. Now, fortunately, because I'm focused on channels and alliances, we represent all of those life cycle, all of those pieces of the life cycle. So we're always thinking about how do we identify new opportunities for us? How do we drive expansion in existing accounts? How do we help our sales teams win? What value can the various types of partners that are out there, be those systems integrators, other ISVs, OEM partners, resellers, what can they bring to the sales cycle to help us win more successfully, and what can we bring to them? And then right along, delivery, make sure the customer's successful, and then we drive great adoption, which hopefully starts a virtuous cycle. And so I always think about, and I recommend the teams do, always think about what are you doing in each of those processes to make sure that, there's value being represented. You'd even go further, and there's a similar life cycle I talk about a partner life cycle, which is very similar, but that's also around channels and alliances and how I preach to the team about what they should be focusing on.
Yeah, so keeping the team focused on providing value makes sense to me. And you've got a bunch of humans who have all kinds of questions when they're in the midst of change. And so how have you, when you've been leading a team, help folks to answer their questions and minimize the disruption for them so that you can get them as quickly as possible through that foggy period and keeping them focused on, here's our work?
Yeah, it's super interesting. I think there are a few things I've learned, and lessons along the way from the various roles I've had. First of all, when I was an individual contributor and what I was going through and the feelings I was having about being acquired or being merged into other teams. And then as I grew into manager and then ultimately, leader of the entire, channels organizations and those types of roles, a lot of lessons to learn. And I've done a lot of self-analysis on how I act and how people perceive me acting and how that impacts how they act and how they approach their work. And so for me, one of the things that I try to focus on is bringing people along with me, right? And that sometimes has to be a conscious decision about going slower so that you can go faster, right? And there are times for sure. And the analogy I'd use is I'm teaching my 17-year-old daughter how to drive. There are times for sure when you have to yank the wheel, right?
Yeah.
or hit the brake or pull the e-brake or something, make some noise to make sure that the right things happen before something bad happens. And then there are other times where you have to miss a turn and you have to take the long way around the block, to make 4 right turns instead of 1 left or something like that to get where you want to go. And it's important that people understand why. You give them space, you give them coaching, give them encouragement, you teach them the new motion, if there is a new motion that you're implementing. But the important thing is that you bring them along with you so that you can ultimately go faster later, right? And so it's kind of that go slow to go fast mentality is what I try to bring to the equation. Not always possible, but wherever you can do that, that's incredibly important.
And everybody on your team is different. So how do you modulate your style depending upon, this person I need to pay a little more attention to, this person how do you modulate given that everybody's different?
Sure. Well, there are loads of different tools out there and methodologies on skills assessment, personality assessments. I'm fascinated with those. I think if it didn't work out for me in channel sales, I probably should have been a psychologist or something, along those lines, because I am fascinated with how people react to change, how they react to stress, how they react to all types of things, and really why they do the things they do or why they act the way they do. And so if you believe in the premise that people are generally intelligent and logical and do things for a reason, then it's a matter of what's their makeup that puts them in the position or gives them the triggers to act the way they are. So I'm a big fan of Gallup Strength Finder. I love that. I love sharing my results with others so they know how I'm thinking, how I tick. And I love to implement that with my team and review it. Because when I do that, it gives everybody a common language to work from. And then, so even when, your methodology may be different, you can each appreciate the why and maybe give a little bit easier, understanding that it's not with malintent or, everything is done in the interest of the team, of the value, and understand where people are coming from. Well, then it's a matter of, okay, well, how do I adjust my style or adjust to the other person so that we get the best outcome, we provide the most value to the organization? So I'm a big fan of that. It's been tremendously helpful to me and the teams I work with to just give us that common language, give us the understanding of each other, and appreciate that everybody can come from different perspectives. And then when you enlist all of those different skills and the diversity of thought, you almost always get a much better outcome. So I love to look into those types of things.
I love that. And that's a great gift for your team. So on behalf of your team, thank you for, having those kinds of conversations, because it helps build those relationships that are critical so that we can assume positive intent when someone who's wired very differently than I am says or does something that I don't understand. And I don't take it the wrong way. I don't take it like they're throwing me under a bus or doing something to me. They're just different. It helps me maintain a connection and continue to be able to engage and collaborate with that person.
You spurred a thought there, Greg. I was just thinking about some of the scenarios in the coaching I've received over the years, and one really sticks out in that as I was trying to implement change, I had a leader in the organization who said, look, you have to explain the why to everybody. And when that's not getting through, because sometimes it doesn't, sometimes people are closed, they're feeling whatever and aren't really adapting to what you're saying. You have to find, different words, different ways to say it. But at some point, you might just have to tell them, look, we have two options. You can engage in the process and help us get to the right solution, or I can do this to you. And it's almost comical. And look, I can make a decision if that's what you want, but then I'm doing it to you as opposed to, you're engaged in the process, you're helping problem solve with me, and we're doing it together. And sometimes just like saying those words in such a clear way that you have a choice as an employee, as a teammate, as a cross-functional leader to engage or not, that kind of breaks down the walls a bit and said, you're right. I do want to participate here. I do want to have a say in this. And thank you for the opportunity. It generally changes the mindset. So there's a few sayings and words that, work for me over the years that I love to get out when I can. I think they're useful to people to hear them.
Yeah, it's empowering. I want to empower people. I don't want to disempower them. So I love that. So the fact that you enjoy all these, and I love all these assessments too, because it helps me grow in my self-awareness. It's another little piece of me that I get to understand. And so it can help me to figure out why I behave the way I behave. Oh, that's why I do that. And then it could help me get to a point where, I behave this way because I'm wired this way. But is it still productive for me, or has that behavior become counterproductive? And so I'm curious how, if you have that kind of a flash of how do you then take the next step in growing as a leader and try to minimize that behavior that worked at some point but might not be working anymore?
Yeah, I think there are a few warning signs we all have if we pay attention. Again, I had another coach at a period of my time used to call it like the check engine light, or the yellow flashing light on your dashboard, if it still exists anymore, where you get a signal, right? And the better you can attune yourself to, I need to change, I need to adjust, either it's not working with this individual, I need to try a different approach. The better you can attune yourself to those things, the quicker you can get to the outcomes that you want and the better experience you'll have with your teams. And so, I've learned over the years to write those down. I actually have 4 or 5 of them taped to my monitor at any given time, and I adjust them over time as I'm thinking about them, as I learn a new skill or trick. But a big one for me is how am I showing up? Because for me, when I'm under pressure, when I'm under stress, when I did the 20-hour workday, 4 hours of sleep, showing up for a 7 or 8 a.m. meeting, it's important for me to just do a mental check and just say, am I coming into this meeting loaded for bear and getting very incisive and very directive, or do I need to take a deep breath and relax for a minute and understand that this is an entirely different audience than the people I left off with 10 p.m. last night, right? And make sure that each meeting and each interaction, you understand what's expected of you, what will get the right outcome, and how you can advance the ball the fastest. Now, I have it on my monitor for a reason, because I don't always do it. And so it's there for a mental check. And I think those are great things for people to do. And I share them. In this way, as people on my team see that happening, they can help me with that, right? And they can say, they can put a check in place. So I have a few others that are good about, that work for me, remembering to explain why I'm not getting very, too directive with the team, listening to understand. I mean, these are all things that we've all heard, but these are the ones that I trip up on.
Yeah.
And so I try to have checks in place for myself so that I'm continuing to improve. And as I find others and other blind spots in my game, then I'll work to address them as well.
So it sounds like, too, that by you doing that, you're modeling and creating a culture of feedback with your team.
That is actually the next one, which I didn't mention, on the monitor, is actually ask for feedback. There's some great exercises that I think people should do. And just that on a regular basis, if you can ask, how's this going for you? I try to ask that once a month of all my leaders, and I do skip levels and things like that. How's the team going? How am I showing up for you? Am I giving you what you need? Is there something else that would help you move, the score 1 point forward or 1 degree forward? So that feedback loop is incredibly important, and it's important for leaders to be self-analytical and reflective, because the marketplace is changing. The new workforce entering the marketplace is changing. If you're dealing with different cultures for a new, the first time, or working in a different area, taking on broader leadership capacities, even if it's the same country and culture, maybe it's an entirely different organization, going from a sales organization to a development organization or a services team or a pre-sales team, very different personality types, as a stereotype in each of those organizations. So it's important to, just really ask, how effective are you being, and then seek to improve on that. So I'm a big believer in feedback, and I try to remember to ask for it.
I love it. Yeah. So with younger leaders, you've got a lot of wisdom to share when you have an opportunity to mentor a younger leader or a first-time leader. What probably rises to the top in terms of the advice that you share?
Sure. That's, first of all, thank you for not calling me old. Yes, I've got a number of experiences. I told you before, I'm calling in from my parents' home as I'm visiting with them. I'm the youngest of 7, and so I naturally think of myself as young. Yeah. But I'm not anymore. You can see from my resume, I've got a lot of gray hairs. And so I really enjoy that part of it, coaching others and helping them learn from what I've learned, and giving them simple tools often to help them succeed. And the first one I'd say is, look, be authentic. Be open and be vulnerable. It's okay to share not only what you're good at, what you're excited about, but what you're not so good at. And either somebody may help you become proficient, or they may take that on for you. You may find someone to cover that blind spot. But the more you can share about yourself, in that regard, and even in a personal sense, you'd be shocked at how, I think they are shocked at how often people are there to help them succeed, invest in them, and really help them overcome what challenges they have. And it also builds trust in those around you that you're not impervious, that you do have things that we all need to work on. And I find that's a really important one. The other is almost the opposite. I really challenge them to have courage and take chances, but listen while they do it, and not with reckless abandon, take calculated risks, but actually take the risks. I am always surprised at how qualified, how smart, how skilled the people are that I work with. But then I'm also shocked at how few of them actually take a chance, go out on a ledge and really try something new. They often are looking around for, what's the safe bet? What would somebody else do? Can I have permission? As opposed to maybe giving it a shot more often than they currently do. And so I try to encourage them to do that. And because knowing full well they're going to fail sometimes, but they've got to learn those lessons, and that's how they're going to get better and be able to help those around them when they do. So I try to encourage on that side, but then also be open and vulnerable in the process as well, and be open to help.
Fabulous advice. Fabulous. So I like to end all my coaching meetings and my meetings with teams where we all express gratitude, because it helps our brains. We feel better when we give and receive gratitude. I want you to know that I'm really, really grateful for our time together today and for all the wisdom that you shared. It was a great time. I really appreciate it. So I want to give you the final word. Share some gratitude. Share anything you'd like. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. I appreciate it as well. Thanks for reaching out. This is a fascinating topic for me. So as I've explored some of the other leaders that have been, on your podcast, I get nuggets from each of them. So hopefully this provided something to a few others, and I'm grateful for the opportunity. In general, look, I'm also very grateful for my team. I happen to be, visiting with my parents this week, helping them through some issues, and my team's really there to support me. That's an awesome feeling, particularly after only being with the company, 4 or 5 months at this point. I'm not sure when we'll air; it'll probably be much later. But at this stage in my trajectory with Boomi, that the team, not only my own team that direct me, but cross-functionally, the rest of the leaders in the organization have just been fantastic and given me the flexibility to work in off hours, where I can, and maybe take a break from the Zoom and Google Meet sessions, and get the work done and be there for the business, but also have some personal time as well. So I just appreciate that from everybody I'm working with, and thankful that I have that kind of opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you very, very much. Really appreciate it. That is another episode of Ultra Leadership. We will see you next time. If you're enjoying Ultra Leadership, please take a minute and give us a review wherever you find your podcasts. And please stay in touch. Sign up for our Ultra Leadership newsletter at ultraleadership.com. Now, before you jump to your next meeting, I invite you to reflect on what you heard today. What stood out for you? What insight might you want to incorporate into your leadership practice? Until next time, remember, as a leader, you always have the power to shape the future and change lives. So go to the edge and push farther. Thanks for listening.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.